Good evening YouTube, and welcome back to the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel, and welcome to New York. We are at La Guardia Airport here in New York City. We are this Delta 737-700 just down here, and today we're going to be flying south for around about 500 miles to Wilmington in North Carolina. This is a subscriber request from subscriber Hannah, who has flown this route in real life and would like me to fly it on the sim. So we're going to do that today. And what we're going to do, we will be taking a look at some scenery of New York in a bit, but we've got plenty of flying to do, so we'll look at that once we're in there, if that's right. And what we're going to do right now is get the plane set up. So this is the 737-700, and I've got the power on, but I haven't done much else with the plane just yet. So I'm just in the process of getting all of this stuff set up. So let's turn on the APU. That's the auxiliary power unit, which means that we are now on external. We're on the plane is powering itself. We aren't reliant on a ground power unit. So what that means is I can release the ground power just down here, and I'm just going to start working my way around the cockpit. So here are our emergency oxygen masks, which are obviously all working okay. I am going to set up the autopilot here, so we're going to be taking off. We're expecting from runway 31, so I'm just going to, for the moment, set the heading to be 310, like that. So we're going to be climbing up to 38,000 feet, so I'm going to set 38,000 feet in this window here. Just overshot, there we go. Working down, this here is the auto brake switch. I'm going to set that to RTO, just there, which means rejected takeoff, in case takeoff goes wrong and we need to stop very, very quickly. And coming down here, I am going to tune in to VATSIM's Unicom frequency. I am flying this online, and that means I need to be ready to use my radio to do some air traffic control. And I also need to have my transponder on, which is just a little system down here which allows ATC to see me on their radar screens. I can also do some fun stuff like test the fire alarms working, if it's going to let me. Maybe not. Let me try doing that this way instead. There we go. Yeah, they're working nicely. On the overhead panel, in fact, what I'm just going to do is, before I do that, let's just load up with people and fuel. So our fuel load today, it's not that long a flight. We need 6,309 kilograms of fuel. So I'm going to pop that in there. That's 30% of the tank's full. And our payload, we have a zero fuel weight of 53,300 kilograms. So we're pretty full. We're 88% loaded up. Now going back to the overhead panel, what that means is I can turn on the fuel pumps up here, and I'll turn on the cross feeders. We only have fuel in the left and right hand tanks. Just looking down here, this is where the fuel is, and you can see there's nothing in the center, and we've got 3,150 kilograms in each of the left and right hand tanks. So what that means is, coming back to this overhead panel here, I don't need to turn on the pumps in the center tanks. I just need to turn on the tanks in the center, in the left and right tanks, which are these switches here. Don't forget, this is all hyper realistic. This is all how it's done in the real world. So what else do we need to do? Well, we've got the passengers on board now, so I'm going to tell them to fasten their seatbelts with that very satisfying charm, and with that chime. Sorry, I'm going to turn on window heat, which is important once we're at altitude. I'll turn on the hydraulics, which is how we turn all the various control surfaces to make the plane move in the way that we want it to. And I can turn on the air conditioning packs. It's a pretty warm day in New York, so we will need those on. As for our pressurization system here, I'm going to put that up to 38,000 feet. That's our climb altitude. But we will be landing at pretty much sea level 0 because Wilmington is right on the coast. So this is all looking pretty good. It takes a while to figure out how you get a plane like this set up. What we now need to do is tell the plane where we are and where we're going. So for that, I'm going to reach right out the top here to these 2 switches, which are called our inertial reference systems, and that is going to start powering up the systems in the plane which tell the plane where it is. And you can see that these are slowly coming to life, these screens. Whilst that's doing its thing, I'm going to go back down here to this computer. Obviously this is a computer within a computer, given I'm on a flight simulator. This is called the flight management computer, and I'm going to start programming in our route. Now this takes quite a lot of practice to figure out how to use it, but we are currently at La Guardia Airport in New York. Hello Ian, nice to see you online this evening. I did not mean charm, I did mean chime. When I mentioned charm, I was actually talking about myself. I'm sure you knew that was true. Joking, of course. So we're at La Guardia Airport, which is KLGA in ICAO terms. ICAO is just an acronym for, which refers to all the different airport and airline codes. We pop that in there. We're telling the plane that we're at La Guardia. We now put in our route, which is La Guardia, KLGA, to Wilmington in North Carolina, which is KILM. Little fun fact for you, all major airports in the United States have a code which begins with K. Can I also just say, by the way, my co-pilot this evening is one Briar, who is a golden retriever who spent a lot of his time sat behind me. He's just down here at the window looking out. He's not the most attentive co-pilot, but he is a very yeah, he's a good boy to have alongside, aren't you, pal? What we just have to hope is we don't have any late Amazon deliveries, because if that were to happen, I think we've got an Amazon delivery, because that's the response we get if that happens. Okay, let's get back to the flight management computer then. So we're going from La Guardia to KILM. I can select, I can now formally request that route to go into the FMC, and what I'm telling it to do is pull up a route that I have pre-planned using my Navigraph. So this is what our flight tonight looks like. I'm just going to switch it to the world map. We're just flying down the East Coast. We're up here, right near the centre of New York. We're going to head right down the coast to Wilmington, just here. Around about an hour's flying time, 444 nautical miles. So around about 500, normal miles in road driving terms. So that's what our route looks like. I can export that from Navigraph into the sim, which I've done. So I'm now asking the FMC to load that in, and as it does so, it will then be visible on the navigation display just on here. So it's just come up there. We're just going back to the FMC again. What we're now going to do is tell it how we're going to depart. Let me now bring up flight radar 24. So here is La Guardia in real life. It's clearly a very busy afternoon at La Guardia. You can see all of these planes all doing exactly the same thing. They are all heading out to take off on this runway, which is heading slightly northeast, which means it must be runway 31. So we're going to do exactly the same. Of course, you always take off against the wind. The wind is actually variable at 6 knots, but they are obviously landing all the planes on runway 31, so we will do the same. Overcast, 25 degrees, so nice and warm, but cloudy. And we can then just double check that over here on Navigraph, because if I bring up the charts for La Guardia. We can take a look at what the airport looks like. Here is a map of the airport. We are where this pink arrow is, and that's where the runway is that we're going to be taking off from. There's runway 31 just at the end here. So it's rather helpful. I'm actually parked in one of the gates closest to the active runway that we're going to be departing from. Anyone would have thought I'd done some preparation for this. So let's jump back to the sim. We are therefore going to be departing on runway 31. There aren't any standard instrument departures from La Guardia. We're just going to take off and hold the runway heading. In real life, you would get some air traffic control vectors to get you en route, but we're just going to take off and hold the heading and find our own way there, because I don't think we have any controllers on. Oh, correct. No, we do have New York Central on, so we might be speaking to New York at some point. Then what we want to do is take a look at La Guardia. Sorry, Wilmington. So KILM brings up Wilmington. Much quieter in Wilmington. In fact, who is going into Wilmington? Is anyone flying to Wilmington? Yeah, we've got a couple of Cessnas doing their thing. There's a Piper Cherokee. Lovely. So they are flying also in a northeasterly direction. If we take a look again at Navigraph, we will be able to figure out which runway that is. So if I open up my charts for Wilmington, yeah, that will make sense. They're landing on this runway here, which is runway 6 by the looks of it. Okay, and I've just realised I think I've got the wrong runway in here, haven't I, for La Guardia? Let me just double check that. Is it actually runway 31, or did I mean runway 4? I meant runway 4. So let's go back to the sim and correct that. We're taking off from runway 4. We're going to be landing on runway 6. So departure from LGA is runway 4. Arrival into Wilmington is going to be, we'll do the ILS Yankee into runway 06. And our flight number today is Delta 4866. There we go. And what I then do is go activate and execute. And when I look up here, you can then see a pink line on this navigation display, which confirms that the route is now fully on the system. And if I put it in plan mode, I can actually just skip through it and make sure it's all there, so I can see what this looks like all the way down the coast. So that's that bit done. So let's go back again to the flight management computer. We're nearly there. We now need to do the Perfinet page. I'm going to just request our performance initiation data. This fills out all these various boxes. So this is about weight, zero fuel weight, fuel reserves, cost index, cruise altitude, and so on. That should come up. There we go. I can now load that automatically. So zero fuel weight of 53,300 kilograms, 2,400 kilograms of reserve fuel. Cost index is 6. That's an airline thing. Don't really know what that means, to be perfectly honest. And there you see we've got our cruise altitude of flight level 380 or 38,000 feet. So I'm going to execute that. N1 limit, I'm going to do a full power takeoff today because I'm not that familiar with La Guardia and I don't know if we've got enough space to do a D-rated takeoff. D-rated takeoffs are used to preserve engine life. And now we get to our takeoff page. I'm going to do this with 5 degrees of flap. And let me try that again. 5 degrees of flap and there. No. There's us. There we go, that's better. 5 degrees of flap. 6.5 degrees of trim. That gives me a V1 speed of 124 knots, which is the go, no-go speed. If I continue after V1, I have to take off. I'm going to rotate at 127 knots and I'm going to leave the ground at 135 knots. All very precise. 6.5 degrees of trim I'm just going to set down here. So this is the trim wheel on the 737. Just need to turn this until this little white arrow is at roughly 6.5, which is around about here. So just take a few seconds to get there. And that will do. Okay, so that is pretty much now the flight management computer all set up and ready to go. What I'm going to do is now put my takeoff speed into the MCP, just up here. I'm going to turn on the flight directors. I'm going to arm the heading hold, and that all otherwise looks good. I will turn on the arm the auto throttle there as well. Otherwise, all looking pretty good. I will turn the parking brake on as I'm about to remove the wheel chocks. Meanwhile, on the overhead panel, we're pretty much set to push and start. So let's go ahead and do exactly that. Just over on the right-hand side FMC, I will put in our progress page. But what I can do on the left-hand side is where do we do it again? Oh, hang on, that's the wrong page. Push back, here we go. So I'm going to push back, and I'm going to turn the nose to the right, 90 degrees, and I'm going to start that.
Cockpit to ground.
And you get this little voice come on PMDG. Which calls the ground.
Ready to push, tail to the left, parking brakes off.
Okay, so he's telling me to take off the parking brakes. And what we're now going to see is the plane will start moving backwards. Pleased to say there are no other planes taxiing around. There's another aircraft just over there. But here is the airport. The plane is pushing back. The tail is going to go to the right. And we're then just going to taxi on down there to the end of runway 6. And look at that skyline in the distance. There is Manhattan. Absolutely spectacular. And we're going to be looking at that in a little bit more detail as soon as we've got in the air. What we need to do at the moment is get the engines on. So for that, I'm going to turn off the air conditioning. I know it's 25 degrees outside, but I've got to turn the air conditioning on to get the engine started. And I'm going to switch the engine starter to the ground position on the 737. Down here, I then look for the N2 reading to reach 15 or above. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and now I'm going to put some fuel into the engine. And that is going to get engine number 2 started. You can hear that, hopefully. I'm going outside. Pushback is complete, so I'll set the parking brake. There we go.
Brake set.
What I'm now looking for is for that switch to click over to the center position. When it does that, the engines have started. Or the engine, right-hand engine has started. Right, that one started, so left hand now, over to ground, and same again. Looking for 15 on the N2 reading. $14.15, there we go, and let's pop the fuel in, and that's going to start up engine number 1. What I'm going to do is now ignore that. I have my thrust levers in the wrong position to be sitting still on the ground. So let's set the flaps to 5 degrees. Okay, so engine number 1 has just clicked, and that means it is on and running. So I need to turn on the yaw damper, I need to turn on the probe heat, and I can now turn back on the air conditioning, and I'm going to turn off the APU. In fact, first of all, I always forget this on the 737, you actually have to switch over to engine power. When I'm on the ground without the engines on, I'm drawing power from the APU, the auxiliary power unit, which is a little engine at the very back of the plane, which, you know, just hisses out the tail fin. Once I've got the engine started, I have to switch power over to be drawn from the engines. It's quite old-fashioned in that sense. going to turn on the taxi lights and let's do another check. This is the caution warning system. I want to make sure nothing comes up on either of these. Again, really quite old-fashioned for a plane that is still in service all over the place. Right, okay, I think we're good to go. So, just double check I'm on Unicom, which I am. Okay, parking brakes can go off. I'll turn my headset on, which means I can look around freely, and I'm going to do a right-hand turn. La Guardia traffic, Delta 4866, taxiing runway 6, La Guardia traffic. Bit of a tight right-hand turn this, but there we go. So there isn't actually any air traffic control covering New York La Guardia at this point in time, and honestly that is a relief for me in some respects, because doing air traffic control and also trying to keep you guys informed as to what I'm doing is one of the biggest challenges of doing live streams. So makes it a little bit more simple if I don't have to juggle the air traffic controllers at the same time. But it is pretty amazing that you can do flight simulation with full human air traffic control. It's one of the best things about flight simming for me. I fly online on VATSIM, and there are a lot of other people who fly online alongside me, so I can show you that right here. This is SimAware. This is a map showing all the different people who are flying online right now. Just a mass of green aircraft, and if you go all the way in here, just make sure it's refreshed just before I do this. If I go all the way into New York, all the way down to La Guardia, you will see Delta 4866 just here from, sorry, let me just zoom in. That's me, Delta 4866 flying from La Guardia to Wilmington. So there are a few other planes here at La Guardia this afternoon. One, apparently, oh yeah, there he is. There's a plane just over there, which is, let me take you back to the sim. There's a plane just over there. So there's another VATSIMmer flying that plane, and I can see him on the radar screen just here, because I am, it's slightly delayed, but I am just at the end of the runway here now, and that's that pilot just there. It is that realistic. So all I'm just going to do is just zoom out. Can't see any other aircraft on approach, but nonetheless I will just announce my intentions. La Guardia traffic, Delta 4866, lining up, taking off, runway 6, La Guardia traffic. I'm just turning on the landing lights, turning on the strobes, turning on the wing lights, and I'll also just give us a little bit of breakaway power to pull onto the runway. And once we are in the air, I'm going to show you a few highlights of the scenery in New York on Flight Sim 2020. It is pretty spectacular. Okay, so with the 737, the takeoff is like this. You advance the throttles a little bit to 40% of N1. The 40% N1.
Guardia traffic, Spirit Wing 629 taxi, kilometer 31. Guardia.
I'm reading that 40% from just down here. So that's holding the engine at 40%, and then I'm going to hit the takeoff go around button and take it all the way up. So sounds like a Scottish guy there who's also flying into La Guardia today.
80 knots.
80 knots.
V1, rotate.
Okay, pulling back,
V2,
and there we go.
positive rate of climb.
Gear up. Okay. Trim wheel just adjusting itself there. Bring in the flaps to 2. And flaps 1. What I'm now going to do is turn 90 degrees to the right, so 135 on the heading. And flaps up. And I'm going to accelerate away to 240 knots, 250 knots, which is the maximum speed you can do below 10,000 feet. Still just flying this manually at this point in time. 737's a lovely plane to fly in this respect. This aircraft is the PMDG 737. PMDG makes some wonderful add-ons for flight simulators. They are just so realistic. And this one's only just been released and it's no exception. It's just fantastic. I'm so pleased with it. So I've now engaged.
Boeing 629 with departure runway 31. LaGuardia 7 departure vectors to white. LaGuardia.
Yeah, so I've also got a new Airbus A320. I've just recently purchased the Phoenix Airbus A320, which is fantastic. I only got that a couple of days ago, so it's a little bit too soon for me to do a live stream in a plane which I've only had for a couple of days. But I will be using that on future live streams as well, I expect. Let's do another 90-degree turn, this time to 225 degrees. So we're now flying basically 180 degrees in the opposite direction to the direction we took off in. And if I go over here in the plane, we should be able to see La Guardia down there. Can you see La Guardia? Actually, no, it's a bit cloudy, isn't it? Kennedy should be down there somewhere. I think that's Kennedy Airport just over there, maybe. But never fear, because I have taken some drone shots already to show you in just a few moments' time. So over 10,000 feet, we'll turn off the landing lights now. Turn off the taxi lights. I'm also just going to turn off the wing lights. And this is all going very well so far. So I'm now going to connect us up basically with our planned route, which takes us first to a waypoint called White. So I've now basically locked in that route. If you look down at the navigation display just in the center here, you can see I am on a pink line all the way to that waypoint called White. Then it goes to somewhere called CYN, and the route goes all the way down the coast, waypoint by waypoint. Okay, so this is all looking quite good. Once we've got above this cloud, I'm going to turn off the seatbelt signs and provide a little bit of in-flight entertainment by way of some scenery of New York. Let's see what we can see of New York out the window now. Oh yeah, okay, so well, that's Manhattan down there, isn't it? That's Manhattan just down there. LaGuardia is just back there. You can see a plane actually just on its way in. And we're going right over the top of Kennedy. So if I go outside for a second, we might... Oh, we're right in the thick of this cloud, annoyingly. But yeah, you can see Kennedy Airport. We're going right over the top of it there. There's Kennedy. That's actually quite loud, isn't it? Let's just turn that down a bit. Yeah, so there's Kennedy Airport there. You can see the runways of Kennedy. And downtown New York is just in the distance over there. And La Guardia is just sort of underneath that bit of cloud over there somewhere. Okay, so we're now up at 19,000 feet, which is through transition altitude, so we're now standard pressure. And the seatbelt signs can now go off, pretty much above these clouds. And I'm going to switch over to VNAV, which is the altitude setting on the autopilot, which we're going to use for pretty much the remainder of the flight. So, time to now give you a bit of in-flight entertainment, as I say. So, I took this video a little earlier on using the drone, just to show you the magic of New York City on Flight Sim. This is, of course, the Statue of Liberty, looking over towards Manhattan. This is where Flight Sim 2020 is just in a class of its own, really, because when you can explore graphics this detailed, it's not just a flight simulator. You can literally go and explore the world. I've never come across graphics which are this realistic. Now, I don't know all the different bits of New York. I have a funny feeling this might be called Midtown. We're kind of now heading up from the Wall Street end of Manhattan up towards where the Empire State Building is. I have only been to New York once, and that was back in 2003, so you'll forgive the fact that I've forgotten some of this stuff. This, of course, is the Empire State Building that we're climbing up alongside here. And just out here on the waterfront is the United Nations building, I think. Now, this bit, because this is one of my subscribers, Hannah, has requested that we cover this. Hannah and I work together, and this building right in front of us right now is the office building that we would work in if we were in New York. We work in London, but that's the office building on the left-hand side where the company we work for is based, which is quite cool. Again, just the extent of the detail is remarkable. And then we can head up what I believe is Park Avenue and head towards Central Park. Times Square just down there. And again, we're now heading backwards towards Central Park. Here is the park, just in front of us. And there's even a little park of some description down there. I don't know what that is. But that is New York as rendered on Flight Sim 2020, which is astonishing realism, I think. It is very easy to forget what flight simulators used to look like. I have been a flight sim addict for far longer than I ought to have been. I first got into flight simming when I was about 10 years old, and at that point flight sims were extremely basic. It was literally green for ground, blue for sky, and some very basic dials. And in fact, my first flight simulators, I didn't even have a joystick. I was running them on a super powerful IBM 286. And yeah, I even thought that was good. I could fly to about 5 airports, and there was no add-on scenery available or anything like that. And I thought that was good. This was probably about 1991. And bit by bit by bit, it's got better and better. In fact, if you take a look on YouTube, you can find videos which show you different versions of Flight Sim over the years. And it is quite amazing when you look at the very first version, which apparently was made in the year I was born, 1982. And they just work up through as you go through. And what's quite funny when you look at them, if you look at, say, Flight Sim 2000, it looks amazing. By the time you get to Flight Sim 2000, it looks incredible in comparison to the first Flight Sim in 1982. But if you then compare Flight Sim 2000 to what this looks like, again, it's almost the same level of improvement multiplied on top again. So this is just amazing in my opinion. I honestly don't know what more they can do with it. Are there sims, Ian asks, are there sims to simply drive the world? Yes, there are some. I don't know if you can do it on Flight Sim. Sometimes you can get add-ons like that. People develop add-ons so you can drive a car. So last time I did a live stream, which I think you tuned into, Ian, I did the flight from Dubai to Qatar, and I did that flight on Prepare 3D version 5, which is actually a different simulator platform to the one I'm using tonight. And there, the graphics are a bit more basic, but on that one, you can get add-ons where you can just drive around, and that is quite fun. I've done that. There might be something for Flight Sim 2020, but I haven't had a look yet. I will take a look, and if I find one, I will let you know. But that would certainly be fun. What's quite funny, if you actually get to street level on Flight Sim 2020, it's quite basic in its own way. You well, not basic. It looks almost slightly derelict. You get down to this level, and there's kind of remnants of trees, and the streets aren't perfectly smooth, and some of the buildings get a bit confused at the base as to how the building should look. So it almost looks like a post-apocalyptic version of New York once you get down to ground level. And John, very good to see you online this evening. Thanks for joining the stream. Let's take a look at what the passengers are looking at. So for subscriber Hannah, who is online this evening, this is what her view might have been like flying this route for real on previous occasions. I can look around the cabin. It's not got any passengers in it, but still pretty cool. There are various bits of the plane that you can sit down in. I love the way that the sun shines off the wing. Again, having been flight simming for so long, believe me when I say you have not always had things shining in sunlight. You haven't always had shadows and that sort of thing. It's amazing what things make the difference, what tricks of the eye they can add in here that somehow make it so much more realistic. And for me, the way they use light to reflect off things and so that things shine and cast shadows, that has a huge impact on making it feel more realistic. And then here we are back outside. It's a smart little plane, the 737. And I can make it fly away like this, which is pretty cool. And we just get lost in a vapor trail. There we are. So, back on the flight, just to keep you updated on that, since I'm flying this potential lethal weapon at about 510, 515 miles an hour now. Everything is going fine. We've also got the autopilot engaged, so I've selected that we're going to be flying up to 38,000 feet. We are now at 36,500 feet, and I've got the LNAV button engaged there, which basically makes the plane follow the pink line. Truthfully, there's not a huge amount to do at cruise, but that means we can enjoy some of the other features of flight sim, including all the scenery around us. And in a moment we're going to go down to ground level so that you can see what it would look like if you were in an airliner flying right above the ground. So let's do that right now. I'm going to go back outside to the drone and simply go all the way down to the ground. So my kids absolutely love doing this because they said, what would it be like? How fast does a plane go over the ground? And this is the answer. This is what it would look like if you were flying just a few feet above the ground. Ready? Whoa, that's almost too much. But it's pretty fast. And it appears to go slower once you're a little bit higher. But when you're down at this level, it is seriously quick. This is what 500 miles an hour looks like. Goodness me, that makes my eyes kind of go a bit funny. This is what it would look like. And if we look up above, you can see the vapor trail on the plane just at the top there. Just spectacular realism. It's a slight shame actually at this point that we're just flying over forestry, because it's even more effective if you're going through a town, but I suppose we are going down the east coast. I think you can just about see the sea out there as well. But this gives you a feel for how fast it would be on a plane if you were just above the ground. And here we are back up at 38,000 feet. So question from Sean, am I on online servers? Yes, I am. I'll just show you actually. I'm on VATSIM, and VATSIM is the virtual air traffic sim. It's very, very popular with online pilots, virtual pilots like myself. This is what the map looks like at the moment. All of these green planes is another pilot like me who's flying virtually somewhere around the world. And you can zoom right in on them and click on them. So here's a plane out in the Atlantic. Here's Air Canada 873. He's a Boeing 777-300. And he's flying from EDDF, which is Frankfurt, to CYYZ, which is Toronto. And he's really there. And right over here, gosh, this is quite remote. Where's this guy going? This is a Boeing 747-8 flying from Stansted to Anchorage. It's an interesting route. Let's check. Goodness me, he's been online for a while. That's a full day's worth of flying right there. And if you zoom in down here, all the way in, probably that one. Or that one? Yeah, there we are. This is our flight. So Delta 4866, B737, that's Boeing 737, at 38,000 feet, doing 436 knots, going from KLGA, which is La Guardia, to KILM, which is Wilmington in North Carolina. If I click on that, it will also just, I can simplify the map and you can see how we're getting along. So Wilmington's down here, La Guardia's up here, and you can see how it just tracks the route that we've taken out of La Guardia, including even the taxi out to the runway just there. So it's incredibly detailed, and this is all online, and happily it's all free, so anyone can join VATSIM. You have to sign up to some terms of use, and that basically involves agreeing to take it seriously. They do not want people kind of joking around and treating this like some kind of multiplayer madness. You know, where, I mean, if you Google search multiplayer flight sim, you can see some pretty crazy environments where people are landing and taking off in opposite directions to each other and doing all kinds of things, and it is a free-for-all. You sign up to user terms on VATSIM where you agree to take it seriously and treat it as basically like a learning environment, and that means you get to fly alongside other people, like I'm doing right now, and if you're lucky you also get air traffic controllers online who you can talk to, and they will control you and the other traffic you're flying with. Now, we don't have any of that on right now. Sadly, we don't have any controllers online in this part of the US, but such is life. You know, sometimes they're on, sometimes they're not. Obviously, in the US, it's what, 4:45 UK, so that's 4:45 US. Most people will still be, will probably still be at work in the US, which is why they're not at home controlling traffic in the virtual world. But let me tell you, there were some good VATSIM experiences during lockdown. There were times when VATSIM was busier, and I'm not even exaggerating, there were times when it was busier on VATSIM than it was on in the real world skies. I remember there were queues to take off from London Heathrow during lockdowns when people were furloughed, which is quite interesting. But VATSIM's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. But it does take some practice. It takes some getting used to. Probably worth doing a few tutorials and getting up to speed on how it all works before you have a go. Can you download it on your mobile? Well, no, not really. So Flight Sim is more of a PC game. I think you can get some flight simulators for your mobile. There's Infinite Flight, which is available on mobiles. I don't think you can connect to VATSIM on that, but that could be something to try to see if you like flight simming. And then if you do, you can get Flight Sim 2020 on a PC. You can also get it on Xbox, and I'm pretty certain there's a way to connect to VATSIM if you got it on Xbox. So, yeah, good luck if you fancy taking up the hobby. I have always enjoyed flying in real life as a passenger. I've always dreamt of being a pilot, but candidly I couldn't afford to train. It's very, very expensive, and for me flight simming is a good alternative. It's a good way to fly without having to fork out to do it for real, and without having to create all the pollution that flying creates. There's something I find incredibly relaxing about it. I know people sort of say, isn't it boring when you sit there up at cruise? I mean, here I am at cruise now. It's not frantic. It probably isn't in real life, to be perfectly honest. When you're at cruise altitude as a pilot, there's not a huge amount to do. But I just find it quite relaxing. It's quite mindful, really, just floating above the earth. 8 miles, approximately 8 miles above the surface, I think we are now. We are, well, I can check that. So just down here, you can see the 38,000 feet. And in meters, that's 11.5 meters. 11,500 meters. So we're 11.5 kilometers up. So yeah, but that's probably about, what, 7 to 8 miles above the surface of the Earth. And we are flying, well, we're doing a ground speed just over here. Our ground speed is 437 knots. That's in nautical miles. And that probably equates to about 515 miles an hour. Oh, that's fantastic, Sean. So you've got it on Xbox. Yeah, see if you can connect. It's well worth trying. Take some practice. There are some brilliant tutorials on how to do it. I have done a couple of tutorials on my channel. If you take a look through the videos list, I've done a couple of basics, kind of essentials sessions on VATSIM, I suppose, how to connect and so on. I keep meaning to do another one, but you know, I am, like everyone else, always short on time. But there are some fantastic tutorials available on YouTube on how to basically how to speak air traffic control, because speaking air traffic control is one of the biggest challenges. Just realised you probably can't hear anything with the plane in the background. When we stepped outside for the drone, I turned the volume down because it's very loud outside, and then haven't turned it back up. So let me fade that back in a bit for you. Glad you enjoyed the drone footage, Ian. Was that drone footage of New York that you enjoyed, or was it the drone footage of flying over the ground at 1,000 feet or whatever it was, 100 feet that you enjoyed, or maybe both? I really enjoy the whole thing of flying from point to point and exploring the city or the town that you're going to be going to. And very shortly we'll take a look at Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm going to level with you, and I don't want to offend my loyal subscriber Hannah, who has kindly tuned in to this live stream tonight, who is from Wilmington, North Carolina, but I couldn't find as much in Wilmington to film using the drone as I could in New York. There, I've said it. It just didn't seem to be that much of a big event as cities go. But I've done my best. I found a handful of sites around the city, but I may need some help when we get there to identify which one is which. So we will take a look at Wilmington in a little while. Let's right now let's just take a look at Navigraph for the chart. So again, just zooming out, you can see the states here and the whole world, and I can zoom right in, and this is showing my flight route and where I am at this point in time. So I am this pink arrow here, and I love this because what this shows is I'm over a place called Salisbury. Not sure of the state. Delaware, maybe? But that means just down there, if I can see a city. Yeah, I can see some bits of a city just down there. That is Salisbury. And all of this ground, all of the ground textures are basically taken straight from Google Earth, in effect. So you're looking at real world textures. So yeah, we're over Salisbury. Again, if anyone knows the state, I've taken a guess at Delaware, but very interested if that is correct. So we're over Salisbury, we're continuing down the coast. We're not at all far actually from Washington and Baltimore, so they are just what, sort of 30-40 miles off to our right hand side, just over here, and then we're going to continue down, going to come over Chesapeake and Norfolk, and then we're going to head down to Wilmington. So let us now have a quick look at what the approach into Wilmington looks like. So I'm going to bring up the charts. We've already had a quick look at the airport, but I'll take another look now. This is what the airport looks like, and we're expecting at the moment to land on runway 6. Now going to have a look at whether there are any stars. STAR stands for Standard Terminal Arrival Route. This is kind of like a set procedure for flying into big airports, where it tells you where to be and how high you need to be at certain points in order to make your way safely in. However, that's academic in this case because there are no star charts for Wilmington. Now that means it's going to be a very straightforward approach, but I do need to plan my approach carefully because I don't have any charts which will guide me in. In terms of approaches, this is then, you know, the kind of the final approach, I suppose, into the runway. So we are expecting runway 6. So I can bring up a chart which shows me how I can approach runway 6. So you can see just there a little diagram of the airport, and then this big long thin sort of needle arrow shape going all the way into runway 6. That is our final approach. Now what this does is it shows me a few things. It gives me these waypoints KevP and Jabes, which I can essentially program into my navigation system on the sim, and when I reach those I will then turn either left or right depending on which one I approach, and then connect up with my final approach course. It's Maryland, Salisbury, Maryland. Thank you, Hannah. I promise I will brush up on my US geography, but I get very confused by the East Coast. There are a lot of smaller states in the East Coast, and they all seem quite clustered together, and I just kind of get a bit lost. So apologies for that, and thank you for confirming. So yeah, we're over Maryland at the moment, and continuing south towards North Carolina. So I'm either going to approach KevP or Jabes, and then come in along this line here. Because this is an ILS, or Instrument Landing System, I'm going to be able to tune into this frequency, 109.95, and that is going to give me an instrument display right here in the cockpit, which will guide me into the runway. It will comprise a localizer and a glide slope. The localizer is the runway centerline, and the glide slope is basically the slide I need to descend along in order to hit the runway at the right point. And I'm going to be able to pick that up by tuning my radios into 109.95. So that's what that looks like. If I come down here, what's helpful is it tells me where I should be in terms of altitude. So it says at Lurkey, what a delightful name for a waypoint. At Lurkey, I need to be at 3,100 feet. At Sappho, I need to be at 1,700 feet. And then I'm in a good position to make an approach into the runway. Where are Lurkey and Sappho? Here. There's Lurkey, there's Sappho. So 3,100 here, 1,700 by Sappho. So that is all quite helpful. In addition, I've got some missed approach information here, and the airport elevation and various other bits and pieces, which we'll come back to shortly. What I'm just going to do right now is jump back into the sim and check how that ties in with what we've got on the flight management computer down here. So I've said this before on previous live streams and videos, but this flight management computer really is of its time. So the flight management computer, I think, was first developed back in the 1980s, and who could have guessed, looking at this, looking at the text on here and the very complex series of buttons, how all of this works. As I say, it takes a bit of practice getting used to it, but once you've got it, it's relatively logical. So if I hit the DEP and R page, departures and arrivals, I can go into my arrivals page for Wilmington, KILM, and there I am. I'm on the ILS Yankee approach, and I'm actually going to switch that to the ILS Zulu approach. Just looking here in this top corner, ILS Z, so ILS Zulu. That's the chart that we've just been looking at. So I want to be on the ILS Zulu approach for runway 06. And look, we've either got Jabes, or we've got KevP, or we've got Lurkey. Now we're coming in pretty much along the coast. So again, looking back at the chart and not having any other sort of approach chart to work with, I think we're going to be coming along the coast along here, just sort of down here somewhere. So if I fly to Jabes and then do a right base leg and link up with Lurkey, that would make the most sense, I think. So let's do that. I'm going to select Jabes. Of course, if there was an air traffic controller on, he'd tell me which way to go. And then I press execute, and that's put that into my flight management computer. And what I can now do is actually see how that plays out looking at the plan. So if I go to plan mode and step through the route, we can see, well, here's what we can see. We can see Jabes just down here, but we've got what they call a route discontinuity. It's taking me to waypoint ILM, which is the Wilmington VOR. That's a sort of basically a radio beacon I can tune into and direct myself towards. And I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go straight down to Jabes, which is just down here. I don't know if you can see that. It's just written there. So back to the flight management computer. Oh, and there it is. Route discontinuity. This gap here. So we go DIW, ILM, then blank, then Jabes. If I line select Jabes and then drop it in there, that will change my route up here. Just look carefully at this pink line. It's going to change my route, and now I go from ILM down to Jabes. But that still looks messy, so I'm basically going to be right overhead the runway, then head towards Jabes and come back in. I don't want to do that either. So what I'm going to do is again select Jabes, and this time overwrite ILM, and see how that looks, and suddenly that looks an awful lot better. So we are going to make our way down from waypoint DIW, there we are, DIW, straight down to Jabes, and then we're going to fly that pattern Jabes, Lurkey, Sappho, and into runway 6. Once again, just looking at the chart, that's this. We're going to fly down here, just as planned, fly down the coast to Jabes, Lurkey, Sappho, runway 6. Now, don't forget that down here, it tells us that we need to be at 3,100 feet at Lurkey and 1,700 feet at Sappho. Let's make sure that we've got that in our flight management computer as well. Lurkey, we need to be at 200 knots and 3,100 feet or above. At Sappho, we need to be at 149 knots, it's suggesting, or 1,700 feet. That's all fine. What I am going to do, though, is just tidy that up a bit and just say we'll be at 200 feet and we will be at 3,100 rather than or above. That, and the 1,700 is fine. So that then gives us our altitude planning. I mentioned earlier on in the flight that I am currently holding my altitude at 38,000 feet here using VNAV, literally vertical navigation, which is a system, you know, within the autopilot. There's different ways I can hold my altitude. I know you think, well, surely you just go up to a certain height and that's it, right? Actually, no. There's different ways you climb, different ways you hold the altitude that you select to fly at. I'm using VNAV mode, vertical navigation, and VNAV ties in with the altitudes that are shown in the flight management computer. So this is the legs page, active route legs. Again, please forgive the 1980s type computing here, but these are the various legs that we're flying. So they're given a 2, 3 or 5 digit identifier, each of them, and then over here it's telling me that I am going to be flying at Mach 0.762, so just over 75% the speed of sound, at flight level 380, which is 38,000 feet. I have got 21.654321 etc. miles to go until I get to ORF. Then my next waypoint is Eddies, which will be another 29 miles away. Then Gilmer, 30 miles, Clappy, 25, DIW, 67. And what you can see here is that I'm going to be doing Mach 762 at 38,000 feet, and again 38,000 feet, and again at 38,000 feet, and suddenly it's 35,600 feet, flight level 356. And then by the time we get to DIW, we're going to be at 17,174 feet, very, very precise, and so on. So Jabes will be at 4,344 feet, Lurkey 3,100, and then Sappho 1,700. And all of that programming can then be executed by using the VNAV function here on the autopilot. That also then means that I can use it to figure out when I'm going to descend, because it's all basically a function of maths, speed, distance, time, etc. So currently on my progress page here on the FMC, down here it says 2T/D to top of descent. That's going to be 17 minutes past 9 Zulu time, so 12 minutes away. That's 87 nautical miles, 86 nautical miles away now. So actually that's not very far at all. Yeah, just over 11 minutes to go before we descend. And that's essential. When you're up at 38,000 feet, a few minutes ago I was saying how we're about 8 miles above the surface of the Earth. When you're up at this altitude, you can't see a runway just down there and say, hey, let's land there. That's just never going to happen. You're never going to be able to get down there in time. You need to be able to plan that approach in intricate detail in order to get to the right altitude and be at the right speeds at the right point in order to then touch down safely. So even whilst we are some distance from our destination, again, we are still up here, so we're now approaching Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. We're all the way up here, but we already know exactly how we're going to descend. We've got 10 minutes to go, thereabouts, 80 miles to fly, then we're going to start the descent, and we know exactly how we're going to approach the runway. We're going to come down the coast and then in to runway 6. And that is how you plan and execute a descent. So we'll be doing that shortly. Just checking the plane is otherwise all functioning okay. It seems to be. Sorts of things that you will periodically do. Just check the engines. They're both running nice and evenly. 85% left and right. Check the exhaust gas temperature. The EGT is nice and stable. Check fuel flow is nice and stable. 0.92, 0.93. So that's how fast we're burning fuel. Check the fuel tanks are nice and even. So 2020 either side, perfectly even. So that's great. If you didn't have that, you might have a fuel leak. And if you think, well, yeah, but a fuel leak wouldn't happen on a sim, it can happen on a sim if you want it to, which is quite clever. There's more engine data down here as well, around the different pressures and so on. Oil pressure, oil temperature. And you can work your way through that and just check everything's fine. But that all looks okay. And you can then look overhead, looking out for any amber warning lights. If you see an amber light in the 737, then that's a problem. So if you see something which is kind of the colour of this text here on the overhead panel, that needs looking at. But no, all looks good. Okay. So we've planned our descent. We've checked that everything is all as it should be on the cruise. And what we're going to do now is take a look at lovely Wilmington. Now, again, I do just want to manage expectations here that it's not going to be quite as glitzy as New York, but let's take a look anyway. Here it is. This is the beach in Wilmington. Well, I think this is called Wrightsville Beach. Wilmington is obviously very close to the coast. And then we're heading into the city. And this is the campus of University of North Carolina at Wilmington, which is quite cool. This is the river, which is called the Cape Fear River, which heads out straight into the Atlantic, which isn't far away. And over to the left you can see well, the Wilmington Railroad Museum is over there on the left-hand side. You can see there's some kind of rail terminal by the looks of it. And then lots of grid-plan streets. There's a sports field down there, baseball field by the looks of it. And then just flying over, it's obviously quite a low-rise city. Over on our right-hand side is the Green Lawn Memorial Park, which is actually not all that green. Plenty of forestry in Wilmington. Looks very tree-lined. And yeah, here's a running track by the looks of it over here. And what have we got? Oh, I think also I managed to find the nearest mall. Here it is, this big white building over here is the mall, and not just any mall, that is the Independence Mall of Wilmington, North Carolina. Of course, the Independence Mall. There's a lot of things in the US with the word independence in them. So it's a perfectly good name for a shopping mall, but I'm not going to give it any marks for originality. Hannah assures me that Wilmington, North Carolina is just as glitzy as New York. Okay. If you say so. So that's where we're headed. and we will be there quite shortly. Just 40 miles to go now till top of descent. Let's take a look and see what we're flying over now. I think we're right on the coast. We might even be over the Atlantic, but let's take a look. Oh no, no we're not. It's more fields, more vast North American fields. Oh gosh, sorry, that is just too fast. I can't handle that. I need to slow the drone down. Oh, there's a wind farm over there, look. Generating lots of clean energy straight off the Atlantic. Lovely. Can't actually, oh no, the plane's just up there. You can just see the end of its vapor trail, but it is just above a cloud. I love again how the sun is kind of breaking in and out the clouds, breaking through the clouds in places. Sometimes it's a bit overcast and then you suddenly get this burst of cloud come through. I have never seen a game with graphics quite like Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. Can we see the plane yet? Is it going to peek out from that cloud? There it is. You can see its vapor trail up there. That is us. It's quite something when it's on Flight Sim, you can both be in the plane and be on the ground. It's, you know, when you're on the ground, it's always weird to imagine yourself being all the way up there in a plane. And when you're in the plane, it's weird to imagine yourself being all the way down there on the ground. On Flight Sim, you can do both. Right, let's head back up. And in a few moments' time, we will begin our descent. But just before we do that, let's do a really exciting flyby. Okay, so we're now a bit of a distance from the plane, and if you were stood on a street and a 737 went by at full pace, this is what it would be like. Pretty cool. Certainly pretty cool in my book, that's for sure. And people ask, you know, what do you find so cool about flying? That, I mean, what isn't cool about flying 8 miles above the surface of the Earth at 500 miles an hour, I ask you. Just 23 miles now, 22 miles to top of descent. So, a few moments' time, we will be putting the seatbelt signs on and beginning our descent. Thank you for them all, Siri says. Well, my pleasure. I think it would be a loss to all of us if I didn't feature some of the best shopping facilities in North Carolina through the magic of Flight Sim 2020. I think the question for Hannah, the subscriber who has requested tonight's flight from New York down to Wilmington, North Carolina, is the Independence Mall as good inside as it looks from the outside? Just the sheer size of the Independence Mall, not to mention its highly original name, it sets some pretty high expectations, and I hope it's as good inside as it looks to be outside. I think I'm getting a bit too sarcastic here. Maybe I should stop. Continue to make good progress down the coast. This is where we are now. In fact, let's just refresh that and make sure it's current, because sometimes it does take a little while. There we are. Oh. There we are. Right. That's our flight so far. Very close now to Wilmington. Still no air traffic controllers on. I can check that if I hit the ATC button down here. You can see where there are controllers on. There's some controllers up near Washington by the looks of it, but we're not flying there, I'm afraid. And oh, plenty going on in the Midwest. So there's controllers on over Chicago, but all quiet on the eastern seaboard. for the time being. Okay, time to descend. Got 1 minute to go now, just 8 miles before we descend. 8 miles a minute is the speed you'd be doing in an airliner. So I'm now going to select 3,100 feet in the MCP, like that. Again, the reason for the 3,100 ties in with this chart, because I want to be at 3,100 by the time I reach waypoint Lurkey at the end of our final approach course into runway 6. So having done all that detailed planning in the flight management computer a little while ago, I am now going to trust that the maths is all correct, and when we begin our descent in a few seconds time, we are going to head down to 3,100 feet directly, bang on schedule. And here we go. I can see that we're now descending. This is the vertical speed indicator, so the needle is pointing down. It's showing that we're descending at 1,050, 1,100 feet a minute. Don't know if you can hear it, but you can also just hear the engines starting to spool back as well. It's always a great moment when you're flying and you hear the engines pull back for descent. For me, flying has always been something I associate with enormous excitement, not just because I love flying, but I also just love seeing the world. I love going to new places. So when you hear the engines spooling back, you kind of think this is the point at which we're going to be stepping off the plane into somewhere to a place I've never been to before. I'm immediately kind of reminded what it was like the first time I flew to San Francisco, or to Orlando, or to Hong Kong, and Shanghai, and all sorts of different places, where you just wonder what you're going to find the minute you get off the plane. All you know is it's going to be very, very different to the place you started your flight from. So why am I wearing a hat? It's a good question. I will answer it in just a second. Just noticed over there's a vapor trail. I don't know if you can see it, but that will be another VAT simmer over there. And again, just highlighting how great VATSIM is. This is us here, and I can see the vapor trail of this plane just over here, which is an Airbus A320 flying from La Guardia down to KMCO, which is Orlando International. That is the vapor trail just over there in the distance. Don't know if you can see that. That is why it's great flying on VATSIM, even let me just get back in the cockpit. That's why it's great flying on VATSIM, even if there are no controllers online, because you don't feel like you're the only person in this virtual world. It's a very kind of live place to be. So since we were last in the cockpit, we've descended through 5,000 feet. We're now at 32,800 feet and descending at 1,700 feet a minute, which is all just down here. So the question was a short while ago about why I wear a hat. The hat is the way in which I look around the cockpit like this. If I look left and right, it follows my direction of sight, basically. There's a little infrared receiver on the top of the cap which reflects off an infrared camera which is on top of the screen, and it means I can move around, and it makes it much, much easier to fly. Makes the most of the virtual environment of this cockpit, and I can explore the the overhead panel like this and just move around. Anything you can do to make the simulation experience more seamless and avoid using the mouse or the keyboard or anything else like that, the better. This is a Track IR headset, and I've had it for years. Still works incredibly well, and I'm really, really pleased with it. Just realised I didn't turn on the seatbelt signs. It's fine because it's not been a rough descent so far, but let's do that now. So seatbelt signs are now on. So you might recall when we were looking at the routes, we were flying towards a waypoint called DIW, which you can just see on the map here, which is now 40 nautical miles in front of us. And we go straight from DIW down to our down to our base leg on approach. The DIW is a waypoint called Dixon. I assume Dixon is another place in North Carolina, just up the coast from Wilmington. So we will be flying over Dixon and then continuing down the coast a short distance and picking up our approach sequence into runway 6. Just going back over to my internet browser window. This is Flight Radar 24, so this is real world flying, not simulated flying. And if I zoom in on Wilmington, I can find out what the weather is doing. So in Wilmington, North Carolina today, it is 27 degrees and the skies are nice and clear. And the air pressure is at 1022 hectopascals. That's something which will be relevant for our altimeter. It's you can get two different readings. One is in hectopascals, the other is in inches of mercury. In inches of mercury, it's 3017. So just highlighted that. We will come back to that very, very shortly when we go through transition altitude. Transition altitude is the point at which we switch from standard air pressure over to local air pressure for the purposes of measuring our altitude. When you're up at altitude, we were at 38,000 feet, it's very important that we are, relatively speaking, at the same altitude as wherever is now the Airbus A320 who's flying down to Orlando, down on our right hand side. It's important that we are at the same altitude relative to each other. Once you get down towards the ground, it's of course more important that you're at the correct altitude relative to the ground. One thing we know about Wilmington from the chart is that its elevation is 32 feet above sea level, so very, very close to sea level. So we need to make sure we have got our altimeter set at the right temperature and pressure so that once we get at ground level in Wilmington, our altimeter will show 32 feet. Now the point where you switch from being at the same altitude relative to the other planes in the sky that you're flying alongside to the point where you're at the right altitude relative to the ground that you're approaching, that is called transition altitude. That's my basic explanation of it. Transition altitude in the US is the same across the United States, and it's 18,000 feet. So we're now descending through 23,100 feet. Another 5,000 feet to go and we will be through transition. and that is the point where we will that's the point at which we will switch over from standard pressure of altimeter 29902 to local pressure of 3017. That will be clearer in just a moment, bear with me. Once we've got through 18,000, it will all make a lot more sense. So, good as time as any to say, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. I would greatly appreciate any likes as well if you've enjoyed watching the video tonight, the live stream tonight. It's a real challenge setting up a YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun. It's something I started doing back in lockdown. At the height of COVID, I needed something meaningful to do with my time and I couldn't really go out. So I started doing videos of my simulated flights. And here we are 2 years later and it's still going. But any new subscribers are welcome. So if you've enjoyed it, please do hit the subscribe button and please do click on like if you've enjoyed tonight's live stream. We're getting very close in now. We're now very nearly over the Dixon VOR, so that is DIW just here on the screen. That's just 7 miles away now. And then we're going to be turning in towards Wilmington. I love how the light changes as you go through the clouds. It gets gloomier. It feels gloomier. Actually feels like the weather is changing. You lose that incredible brightness of being above the clouds with nothing to stop the sunlight, and it gets a little bit more overcast. But as we know from checking the weather in Wilmington should be nice and clear. One thing just to note. Oh, hang on, just before I do that. We're now going through 18,000 feet. So what I'm going to do is now switch over to local temperature and pressure. So I'm going to hit that button, and I now need to change to local pressure, which was 3017. So let me explain what that means. Right now, it says here 29902. That is standard pressure in inches of mercury. I'm now going to make that read 3017 and just look at what happens to the altimeter as I change the pressure. As I change it, the altimeter goes back up again. Okay, so if I take it down to 29902, standard pressure, at standard pressure I'm at 16,500 feet. If I scroll it back up to 3017, I'm at 16,600 feet. Not a massive difference, but it's important obviously once you're making a precision approach into an airport that you're at the right altitude. So I now know on the altimeter that I am at the correct altitude relative to the ground. Now, something I said a few moments ago, I said, oh, worth noting that, and I was going to say we will actually be landing in a minor crosswind. So the winds at Wilmington, sorry, I had it there, let me bring it back up. The winds at Wilmington are 120 degrees at 10 knots. And our runway is on a heading of 058 degrees. So what that means is the wind is going to be coming from, well, it's kind of going to be coming from our 2 or 3 o'clock, from our right hand side at 10 knots. So I will probably feel that. Crosswinds are one of the more challenging things that pilots have to fly through. I mean, this is not exactly a kind of tropical storm, but I will probably be able to feel the crosswind as I make my way into Wilmington. And the way you deal with a crosswind when you're flying an aeroplane is to fly it on the rudders. So because you're flying this way, if the wind is coming from your side, it will literally blow the plane to the side. I can't turn back to where I need to get to using my ailerons, which is the kind of main flight yoke here. Instead, I use the rudder at the back of the plane, which I control with my feet using rudder pedals, and you kind of twist the plane to face into the wind. So I may need to do that a little bit once I'm on final approach in a few moments' time. Down now to 12,000 feet. At this point I'm just making sure that everything's happening quite calmly. You don't want to be in a nosedive kind of altitude where everything's going really fast. So I'm doing 255 knots, which is nice and steady. I'm descending at 1,600 feet a minute, again, very steady there. And I'm heading towards Jabes. That's my next waypoint. Jabes, as a reminder, is this point here. At Jabes, I'm going to make a 90-degree right-hand turn to Lurkey, and then another 90-degree right-hand turn into runway 06. This is called a base leg. All airports kind of have a circuit. When you take off into the wind. That's called your upwind leg. Then you would turn onto a crosswind leg. Then you turn again onto a downwind leg. Turn again on a base leg, and then you turn onto a final leg, or final approach. Now, if you look down there, you can actually see the beach that we looked at in the drone, just down here. It's a little bit brighter. If I just take you back to that that footage of a little while ago. So this is Wilmington as I filmed it an hour or so ago. And you can see that water inlet just down there, just beyond the nose. So we've just gone through 10,000 feet. That means I need to turn on the landing lights. I will also turn on the taxi lights at this point. And I will turn on the wing lights. Under 10,000 feet you need to be at 250 knots or less, which is fine. We're doing 242 knots, so that's all okay. If we look down here, you can now see Wilmington. We're on approach down here, look. So just over there you can see the river that we saw a little earlier on. Let's move along the plane a bit and see if we can I think the runway is just coming up over there. No, there it is. That's got to be the airport. There's the airport, right there. So, just out the window here you can see 2 runways. We are going to be landing on the runway just there. We're going to be landing at that end of it. Okay. And I think that is the Independence Mall, just down there, that big white block. The feature we have flown all this way to see. Okay, so we are that close in now, and one thing which we now need to think about is what do we do if our approach goes wrong, and for that we go once again to our Navigraph chart. On a missed approach, we're going to climb to 2000 and fly direct to Topsy and hold. So the main thing I'm interested there really is climbing up to 2000 feet. In a missed approach, we need to go up to 2000 feet. The other thing I want to just be aware of is what our minimum descent altitude is. That is 228 feet. Okay, I can also check that down here, 228 feet on the ILS. And I'm going to set that into my 737, 228 feet. If you just look down here, you'll see a tiny little bit of green writing there. I can set that to read 228 feet. And what that means is, when I get to 228 feet, it will call out minimums. If you get to minimums and you can't see the runway, you have to go around. I don't think that's going to happen today because it's nice and clear. I'm now going to start slowing the plane right down. We're only at 5,500 feet at this point, so I'm just going to put out the speed brakes. Okay. So I've actually taken the plane now out of VNAV. I was saying earlier on about VNAV and how you can program how the plane descends and climbs using the flight management computer and VNAV. I'm actually now just using level change mode. That means I'm telling it to descend at a set speed. And I've told it to descend at no more than 200 feet. So it is, sorry, 200 knots. So it is slowing down now. We're at 210 knots. I've just realised I haven't tuned in the ILS, which is 109.95, so if I tune that in down here. That will enable me to pick up the instrument landing system. I'm going to slow the plane up even more at this point to 180 knots and start putting the flaps out. And I'm going to switch over to approach mode on my navigation display. So regular viewers of the channel will recognise this. When this pink line hits the centre, we are on the runway centre line. Let me just get the course of the runway correct, 58 degrees. When this pink line is in the centre, we're on the centre line of the runway. When this pink diamond is on the white line in the middle, we're on the glide slope. And I'm just going to switch over now to approach mode. And here we go, here comes the pink line. That's going to hit that centre line and then hold. Plane is straightening up as we meet that centre line. The centre line is called the localizer. And the pink diamond is called the glide slope. Now that pink diamond is not on that centre line, it's just above, which means we are under the glide slope at the moment. So we're levelling off. I'm holding this altitude, and that pink diamond is going to slowly come down to the centre, at which point we will be on the glide slope and approaching the runway at the right gradient. So here we go. You just saw the nose of the airplane just duck down a bit because the diamond is now on the centre line. Now this is all being done at the moment on the autopilot. I've just realised that my approach re-ref has not been set, but checking this, 40 degrees of flap, I need an approach speed of 129 knots. So I'm going to now set 129 knots into the speed window on the MCP. And bingo, there's the runway right in front of us. I'm now going to take control. Do not be alarmed, that is just the warning sound to say that the autopilot is off. So I now have control of the aeroplane. I'm going to put the gear down at this point. And I'm just incrementally putting the flaps out. So I don't know if this looks familiar
1,000.
to Hannah, who is from Wilmington. But this is what it's like coming into this great coastal city in North Carolina.
Glide slope.
Just dropped a little bit under the glide slope.
Glide slope.
I need to concentrate more. So just picking that up again.
$400. 300. 200. 100. Plus 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
And there we are. Not my best landing, not my worst either. I'm relatively happy with that. And we're going to pull off to the left just up here. So I'm going to turn off the landing lights at this point. And the strobes and the wing lights, and we'll taxi into the gate. I'll bring in all the flaps, bring in the speed brakes as well. If I switch over now to the Navigraph chart showing the airport, this is what it looks like. And it looks like we have pulled off the right way off the runway in order to get to the terminal buildings, which presumably is just up here. So we're just going to carry on along taxiway Bravo. You can see that from this letter B. and go and find ourselves a gate. Now that we've landed, I'm going to get the APU ready. That means that when I switch off the engines, the plane will still be powered up. It really doesn't matter how many times I do this on Flight Sim, it is still always so satisfying to land a plane. It's the landings which I really love. The takeoffs are great too, but landings in particular are the best bit for me. There's something about the precision and the difficulty of getting it right. Once I've nailed it, I feel quite accomplished. So the APU is on. Let's switch over now to APU power. Switch on the APU bleed. Got a master caution, but that's because I've switched over. Yeah, that's right. You can see the terminal now coming up. Again, just switching over, you can see that we've made our way nicely along the taxiway up to the terminal building. And we'll pull up, call out the jetway, and call it a night, I think. Looks like we have some slightly disjointed graphics up here, with jetways which are not connected into buildings, but that happens from time to time on Flight Sim. So Hannah, you are returning to Wilmington just next week, so you're going to be doing this for real. I think what tonight's live stream will have enabled you to do is be prepared to take over at the helm of your aircraft in case there's any issue. You know how it's done now. There's no excuse to get it wrong. But safe travels when you go, and I hope this has given you a nice sense of your hometown. Little Marshall down there just helping us in. And there we go. So parking brakes on. There. And I can turn the engines off because the APU is on. And that wonderful sound when you get to an airport and you hear the seatbelts switched off. So I'm going to finish shutting down the plane now, but thanks very much indeed for watching. Thanks also to Hannah for her suggestion of doing this route. It's been an interesting one. I've never flown to Wilmington, North Carolina before, but now I've been, I see no reason not to come back again very, very soon. But thanks very much for the suggestion, and I will do another live stream very soon. And in the meantime, look out for any more for more short and long haul flying here on the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel, both on Flight Sim 2020 and on Prepare 3D, and I will speak to you very, very soon. Thanks very much. Bye now.